defending his own home. We are told that when she would enter a room, he would stand for her presence. I think it's really important, a reminder, especially not just for the younger people, but sometimes we just need reminding that these actions and these words that the Prophet used and did were not because she was his daughter. I think this is something that sometimes we say, well, maybe he respected her this way because it's his daughter. But that's an idea that I think we should work consciously to remove from our heads. Because if that was the case, that if he stood up because she's his daughter, then because we follow the sunnah of the Prophet, we would have to stand for our daughters. Yeah? But that's not the case. We've never been asked to stand for our daughters. We've never been asked to go and knock on the door of our daughters and go there before we go to our homes. But here, when the Prophet would stand for her, when the Prophet would kiss her neck, when the Prophet would do all of these things, it was because Allah told the Prophet, do these things. Yeah? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to let the world know the status that he had with Fatima al-Zahra alayha afdalus salatu wassalam. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And this is how we, I think, understand and appreciate her status. That when we look at these actions that the Prophet did, he didn't do that for anyone else. Yeah? He didn't do that or talk about these except for the people who were closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to describe for us how a servant of God views other servants of God. And this is really something beautiful, for us to absorb and appreciate. And this is something that when we look at the narrations of the A'imma alayhimus salam, we get this really beautiful narration that's reported to have come from our 12th Imam alayhi salam when he wrote a letter to one of his naibs, Uthman bin Sa'id. He says to him in a part of this letter that's found in the book Ihtijaj, وَفِي إِبْنَةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ لِي أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That the Imam of our time says that in the daughter of the Messenger of God, for me, is the best example. Is a uswatun hasana, is somebody that I mold my life after. And this is something that I think for us as believers, if she is a role model for the Imam of our time, imagine being a role model for us in our lives. How we can mold ourselves, learn from her life, so that we can be blessed to be called her Shia on the day when we will reunite with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore our responsibility is to try and learn from her life. And this is something, my approach, everyone has a style of lecturing, everyone has a manhaj that they follow in how they do. Sometimes people say, I don't do enough fadail, for example, that I don't talk about their status enough. And my answer to that is, by now we should know their fadl. Yeah, we should know their status. We don't need to be reminded. We need to learn how to be like them. Yeah? We need to learn how to follow them. We need to learn how to change our lives so that we can be considered their Shia. And this is why we must always try to look at some practicality from their lives so that we can mold ourselves with it. And so tonight, I want to look at her particular title that she is most famously known as, and that is Al-Zahra. The Zahra means the one who is illuminated, the one who has light. And so I want to try to understand what is it that we can grasp from this particular title so that we too can become illuminated. That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? For us to mold ourselves behind her. So the first question is that why is she called Zahra? Right? There are numerous traditions that tell us why she is known as Zahra. We heard in the poetry that when she would stand, she would radiate for the people of the heavens. When she would stand to pray, her light would shine. This is all part of the reasons why she is called. But I'll quote one particular hadith, where it's a lengthy hadith that is found in Bihar, where it is described that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth, He used the light of our beloved Prophet. And then when He created the arsh, He used the light of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then the tradition says, ثُمَّ أَظْلَمَتِ الْمَشَارِقُ wal magharib, and then darkness prevailed over everything. فشكت الملائكة إلى الله تعالى أن يكشف عنهم تلك الظلمة. And the angels complained to Allah and said that remove this darkness that has taken place or overwhelmed all of us. فتكلم الله جل جلاله كلمة فخلق منها روحا ثم تكلم بكلمة فخلق من تلك الكلمة نورا. And then Allah, it says kalima, you know better. It doesn't mean he spoke a word, but this is just how we understand how God works. Even when, for example, we say that that when Allah wants to do something, he says kun fayakun. But God doesn't even need to say kun. I think we understand this is just for our understanding of how things work. We are process-driven people. God is not process-driven. He wants something, it happens, right? And so Allah said something, or Allah created a spirit, a ruh. And then He spoke again, or He created a light. فَأَضَافَ النُّورِ إِلَى تِلْكَ الرُّوحِ. And then He joined this spirit to this particular light. وَأَقَامَهَا مَقَامَ الْعَرْشِ. And then He placed this entity that He just created where the arsh was. فَزَهَرَتِ الْمَشَارِقُ وَالْمَغَارِبُ. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. And this entity brought light back to everything. So the narration says, فَهِيَ فَاطِمَةُ الزهراء. That this spirit that God had created was this lady of light. وَلِذَلِكَ سُمِّيَتِ الزهراء. And it is because of this that happened long before things were created, is that she is known as Zahra. We look at this hadith. Again, this is something that inspires us, it excites us, but then we also look at it from the lens that I like to look at it, and that is that, okay, how do I relate to this title? We have these hadiths that talk about her status, that she was this light that illuminated everything around her. How do we then relate to this? And I think one of the important lessons that we can take from this particular hadith and from her title is the need to strive to become illuminated ourselves. We need to be people who are also full of light. Yeah, and we do this by following her life. But it's a concept of light that I want to focus on for today. The idea of being illuminated. I think sometimes we may not fully grasp. I think we understand, but maybe sometimes we forget that there are different entities within our own existence. There is a spiritual existence, there is a middle existence that is sometimes influenced by our heart and our spiritual existence. We talked about this in the lectures of the heart, in fact. And then there is the external existence. And externally, I can do everything that God asks me to do. Yeah, I can pray, I can fast, and externally, I can fulfill the requirements that God has for me. But internally, if my heart is bankrupt, if my heart has no light within it, I am a source of darkness. I am not a source of light. Yeah? And in fact, these actions that I'm doing may reach a particular level of acceptance, but it doesn't reach the